let's find out how you can do better. Let's set a goal. What are your resources rather than what are your problems? And raising a question, for instance, what's wrong with you, is very different about raising the question, what do you want?
Well, good morning, everyone. Great group. And I know it's because most of us at some point in time have heard of the incredible Ramon Corrales and have had experienced his personal impact on a lot of our lives and a lot of our organizations. And Ramon's just one of the most uplifting, encouraging, and insightful people I've probably ever met. So I've been looking forward to spending time this morning. And for those that aren't familiar with Ramon's work, get a little bit of your incredibly interesting journey from the Philippines and all of the things that you did along that journey and what inspired you to do the work you're doing today. So Ramon, I'll hand it off to you and let you tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Randy. A lot of you know some of my story. I'll see if I can do a quick 5-minute overview. And I think most of you know that a lot of my work is long-term with a few companies where I coach the CEO or president, whoever he or she might be. And then I usually meet with the leadership team or the executive team, whichever is more relevant, on a monthly basis in order to create a culture and then embody it in a structure that is operating at the level of wisdom. So I'll talk just a little bit about the 3 stages of human development and organizational development. But I was, some of you may not even know this, but I was born and raised in the Philippines of Spanish descent. So we spoke Spanish at home, English in school, and a dialect with my friends. I actually know a couple of Filipino dialects in addition to Spanish and English. Very Catholic country, as you know, 85 to 90% Catholic. Very Catholic father that imprinted me early on. So when I was a freshman in college, I actually went to a monastery and stayed there for 7 years. So that was a very important part of my formation, so that you see a lot in my work on spirituality or a spiritual meaning brought to it. Not religion, but the core of spirituality. After 7 years, I left the monastery, met my wife, and then while I was working on a master's in sociology, I was blessed with having gotten a Fulbright scholarship and went from the tropics to Minnesota in a new marriage, not knowing anyone, with $800 in our pocket. But I was blessed to be there at a time when systems theory was really becoming the new model of looking at people not as individuals only, but as groups and the patterns. And so I got a PhD in sociology, but also a clinical degree in family therapy. And so as I look back, when I came to Kansas City, I started my practice as a family therapist. That became the laboratory of how I began to understand the culture emotionally, structurally. Then I worked with family businesses. And there I started to form my own approach to corporate work. And so the 90s became my transition from the world of therapy to the world of business and productivity. And I love the culture of business more than the culture of therapy. The culture of therapy has been tainted by the disease model, where health is viewed in terms of if you're not diseased, then you're healthy. It never quite got to the concept of what is health, what are strengths. So from the year 2000 up to today, I've been immersed in that world of let's find out how you can do better. Let's set a goal. What are your resources rather than what are your problems? And raising a question, for instance, what's wrong with you is very different about raising the question, what do you want? That shifts the whole thing. And then one other thing, there's so much talent here, we could talk for 3-4 hours. Questions. I just wanted to, let me share the screen here on one thing. Let me see. Here we go. So my purpose is really to assist leaders lead from the wisdom altitude, and I'll explain that a little bit. So the premise of this is, listen to this carefully, if you want your associates to operate at the rational level, you must be at the wisdom level. If you operate at the rational level, the highest level that your associates can get to will be the high levels of the emotional or egocentric level. If they bypass you, they leave. If they're more mature than you are, they will eventually leave. So it's incumbent on us to operate in our personal and in our professional lives at the level of wisdom. And so the two core concepts that I've used in my work with leaders and their associates is instincts. You got to do it your way. There's no escaping that. And I've used Colby to help me measure that. So the guideline is do it your way, but lead them their way and train everyone to do that. But then you also need to have a very good grasp of the 3 stages of our human development. Emotional, I only have one view. My set of only my feelings count, and only what I want is really important. If you disagree with me, you're in trouble. That's emotional in essence. Rational, we go, well, let's negotiate our goals, our strategies, and let's come up with agreements. But the difficulty with the rational is if the other party goes emotional, there's very few options left. You either wait for the other one to come back up, or you go down to their level, duke it out at the emotional level, or I'm out of here. Because the rational cannot stand inequality. You have to go to the wisdom level in order to love and to act on purpose. So the example I use is try doing parenting at the rational level. It's impossible. Children will be unfair. So how do you deal then with them when they're unfair? And it's the same thing that I find within the organization. And so some of the discussion we might have is, what in the heck does wisdom look like? How do you think at the wisdom level? How do you manage emotion at the wisdom level? How do you manage will and negotiation at the wisdom level? How do you act and interact what does a wisdom organization look like structurally? And then what are some of the cultural values that you need to cultivate in order to support that structure? And I forgot to point out something there. The more mature your associates, the more mature you are, the less management. The more immature, the more management needed, including micromanagement at times, which is rather draining. So let me leave it at that and guide me. Is there anything you want me to illustrate or point out, examples of wisdom, for instance?
So I have a question. This
Sure.
is very timely for me. Thank you for sharing this. So I have a leader who acts solely at the emotional level.
Mhm.
She is the definition of micromanager. She does things that aren't logical. She is it's really incredible, some of the things that happen. But she's very driven by emotion, and she's very driven by control. And I guess one of the questions that I would have is, what's an example of someone who is not in the leadership seat acting in wisdom and influencing someone who is above them in the leadership seat? So what does that look like? What are some strategies I could use with her?
Okay, to manage a person like that requires very precise ways. You really need to be on your game. So rule number one, you start at the rational level, which is what are your expectations? What are the goals and outcomes that you want? And let me illustrate it by sharing this particular hang on a second. So on the right side there, you see the three parts of the mind. And oh, let me do one other thing. Are you able to see this? The three parts of the mind? Is that what's projecting? Okay. And so you see the dotted line. One of the main guidelines is be careful about slipping into negotiating thoughts and feelings. The guideline here is, especially with emotionally driven associates, you listen to their thoughts and their feelings. For understanding, you build rapport by letting them know you know what they're thinking, you know what they're feeling. They always need a voice. You never stamp out a voice. But don't do it too long, okay? Because if you stay there too long, it gets therapeutic. It becomes therapy. You then ask the question, so, for example, so Sarah, what is it you're trying to do? Go to the goal, the desired outcome, and you lead, you structure the conversation. And so what is it you want? And then they'll probably come back with thoughts and feelings. Let that go for a few seconds. Okay, and if you could have those, what is it this will do for you? You try a little bit of the keep on. I have a model that says I pose for negotiation, issue, participants, and outcome. And I never go to solutions and evaluation until we have a clear joint agreement on goals. Never go beyond that. It's the only point of agreement. Now, many times you won't even get there. And this is very, very critical. You stop reasoning. and start directing. You cannot reason with the emotional mind. And if you have the authority, as I think you do, who was I in dialogue with? Was that?
So this is my direct manager, and
Okay.
she has said things like she wants to be included on every email. She wants to be. I've done some of these things, right? So I've said like,
Sure.
so you're telling me just what does this look like? You want to be invited to every meeting. You want to be copied on every email. Is that right? And yes, but I'm not going to come to every meeting. And she doesn't like it when I point out the logic, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
you're running a team of 10 people and you're wanting to read every email that I send back and forth towards the client. Like she doesn't like it when I point out the logic in that.
Yeah. And the logic will fall flat. And this is where you will be in a conundrum if you're operating at the rational level, because the rational level demands consensus, equality. And when the rational doesn't work, you have to go to the wisdom level. At that point, you direct action. Forget the mind, get thoughts, feelings. You've tried to negotiate the will. Are you willing to do this? Will you do that? And then you go something like, here's what I want you to do, Sarah. 1, 2, 3. And you'll usually get, but I don't think that's right. I understand. Will you do this? Well, I don't think that's the best way to do it. I hear you. So, but I'm asking you to do A, B, C, and let's see what happens. I know your goal is this, and I know your issues are these. Will you do it? Get the will to a point of negotiation. They won't like it, so that it's a matter of not being tyrannized by nice feelings or agreed upon thoughts. But here's what I'm asking you to do. But I don't think that's going to work. It might not. Will you do it? And then after, if they're willing to do it, and you're going to get hit with criticism, and that's where you take a stand, not from an arrogant position, but from a leadership position. And then you say, we'll find out. But I do need you to try A, B, C, and let's see what happens. If the person is complaining about process, that's what you do. If they're complaining about people, and there's a potential triangle where they're dumping on you about a third person, then you go, what's your issue with that person? What is it that you want? Are you willing to go and solve that without me? And if the person says yes, then you go, good. Go see if you can solve that problem. But if you can't, you must come back. Because then I will go with you and bring the two of you together. In other words, in this culture, it is not acceptable to have ongoing, chronic, unresolved relationship issues. This is part of our culture, not just your productivity, but your ability to be a team with 1 or 2 or 3. Now, that's a very quick example. Let me give you just another example of the difference between, say, wisdom and ration. When you're dealing with people, they will, by the way, and that's Chantel, is that your name?
Yes.
Okay. They will emphasize either belonging or inclusion or acceptance or independence, individuality. And if you have someone who's always demanding to be included, and I'm not heard, and why did this happen? Why was I not included in the email, etc.? Then you know they're longing for more inclusion, but they're doing it from an emotional level. They're demanding. Be careful then about here's what the rational does. Sarah, I understand, that you're wanting to be included, but it's really important for you to show some initiative, some independence, and try it on your own. And you will get a yes, but, because you're not hitting what's important to them, which is inclusion, belonging. That would be the rational. The wisdom way. In fact, I was talking to a CEO yesterday, and she was saying, I've got this vice president who's just on task all the time, but she's a little low on the ability to connect, to engage. And I'd like to tell her to balance the belonging and individuality a little bit more. So I said to her, don't hit it rationally. The rational will be let's say, hey, Julie, you need to be a little bit warmer. Listen first, establish rapport first, and then you intervene with the tasks that you want the other person to do. Very reasonable, right? Emotionally, the other person will feel like she doesn't get it. She doesn't get the fact that I've tried that, and this person still doesn't do what I asked her to do. So I said, here's how you approach her. Praise her for her independence, her individuality. She's a task master, and I really depend on you, Julie, to do this. Now, what I would like for you to do is find the independence in the other person and affirm it, because you're so good at this that if they don't feel like you know what they know, they'll reject you. So I affirm actually the independence when that's their thing, and then introduce the belonging. If it's the other way around, praise their belonging and then use that belonging to increase independence. And those patterns are what I call wisdom patterns. I hope that helps some, Chantel.
Definitely. Thank you. I've taken a lot of notes. I'll be trying some things later today.
Okay.
I have a bias towards action.
Yeah. It's okay to be directed. But from the wisdom level, you do it without arrogance, with openness. And if they do the work well, you praise the heck out of them. And then ask them if they want to talk about the prior experience. And if they're more open, certainly invite rational dialogue. But not at the moment they're emoting. Doesn't work.
Let's go to Steve.
Good morning, Ramon. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm interested in more of a real life example, Ramon, without naming a name of an individual. Cite an example of someone who has established a clear purpose in life that they carry forward into their business, and how they articulate that purpose to their employees, how they apply rational and emotional skills in moving everybody in the same direction, sort of like an orchestra master trying to make music.
Yes. Thank you for that, Steve. I have a beautiful example. It happens to be a nonprofit organization. Some of you are familiar with Unbound. They have over 300,000 children around the world and elders as well. The CEO used to be an attorney that I met in the 90s because he was a domestic attorney working with young people, adolescents. So he's now the CEO. And I started working with them 3 years ago. So I've been coaching him twice a month for the last 3 years. This guy really gets it. He's very open. He knows the wisdom code approach that I teach, and he's willing to live it, both with his board, some of which sometimes you get some difficult board members, and with his 7-member direct reports. And he lives on purpose. He's also quite spiritually oriented, so I can go not just emotional, rational, wisdom, but spiritual as well, going deeper. And he looks at himself. He, for instance, his goal in 2020 was to be more bold in his leadership because he tends to move more toward nurturing, connecting, and one of their core values is gentle, balanced leadership. So I took that core value and I said to him, you got gentle. That's check. Balanced, let's work on that. And especially leadership, let's work on being more bold. So how can you take a gentle person, by the way, and help them become clearer, more direct, more sort of no nonsense without being arrogant or authoritarian, by being more authoritative. And he, in the last 3 years, Steve, has taken all of that, all of these concepts, learned them, applied them, and then had his 7 direct reports work with these ideas, not only Colby, but also wisdom. And those 7 direct reports have taken me into their teams, into their leadership teams. They all now know what instincts are, what wisdom means. How do you think from an emotional, rational wisdom level? He's brought his chairperson to some of our coaching sessions. He's brought his direct reports. And now he's had me train his HR department for 1.5 years, where I'm imparting all of my wisdom and knowledge to them so that by the end of this year, they won't need me anymore. I don't know if that's enough of the details. Did you want to ask a more specific description, Steve?
Well, no, I got the main theme. This is a gentleman who has a strong spiritual element to his life.
Very much.
You've helped him identify the values that flow from that and helped him articulate that to his team as well as his board leadership. And, in the world of not-for-profits, a lot of the hospitals are owned by religious organizations, and they call them not-for-profits, but the Sisters of Charity had a phrase, no profit, no mission. So I assume you helped him identify how he can maintain his spiritual self and the values that flow from that and make a profit in the process. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, and it becomes really a wonderful conversation, because when I meet with him and he talks about an event that really triggered an emotional grenade within him, he will start at the emotional level and tell me all of his feelings, and then I feel like bashing this guy's head, tell me more. And then he goes, however, then he goes to the rational level. This is what the other person thinks and feels about this event, in contrast to the way I think and feel and what I want to do about this event. And I'm beginning to see, that I'm going to incorporate his view. And then from the wisdom level, here's what I will do. And then reminding myself that my highest spiritual purpose is to be God in action here, and finding God out there also, and letting the God in me and the God in the other person interact. But he'll then act in the actual interaction, he goes back to the rational level, because that's the language of business. But he comes at it from a sense of all four altitudes, and each altitude has something good to bring. Because if you're dead emotionally, you will not come across as empathic, somebody that gets it. So you've got to be feeling those grenades as well, but finding what's important to me. You don't let the grenade or the emotion lead you, you lead the emotion, and you bring it up to what are the facts, what are my views, what are his views. You bring it up to the wisdom level, what are the patterns here? How am I contributing to the pattern? When I become very optimistic, if the other person gets pessimistic, I note that thing. The more optimistic I get, the more pessimistic they get. So I'll reverse that first. The rational mind hates that. Why can't he get it? I mean, I laid out all the arguments. There's no way he cannot not get it. That's what and then very soon you're down to the emotional level. The hell with this. But if you stick to it and do it within yourself, you have more options. And by the way, as you go up from emotional, there's a lot of feelings. At the rational, there's a lot of words. At the wisdom, fewer words, more actions, more positions. And you negotiate primarily by taking a position. This is where I am. This is where I'd like you to be. What do you think? And from there, you have more of a more movement. That's the way to go 10x.
Thank you.
For folks on here that have been exposed to Kolbe, it's pretty enlightening for team dynamics. We know that human nature, you've seen, like when I've administered to my team, I have folks that are very linear thinkers and they move through a progression. And now when you show them the Kolbe, they understand why I've jumped from here to over there to over there. But when we go in to sell to people, to apply for a job, to raise funds for a charity, we got folks on here doing all of those things. We don't always get to administer the Kolbe. How can we figure out that a Harry is like a Harry or a Drew's like a Drew quickly to be more effective in how we would approach people when we don't know that, but we need to develop some rapid human insights?
Very good. Can you see Randy's Kolbe there? 3394.
I hope you'd lost that.
So let me focus on Randy first. Then I took one of my other clients with his permission to see the opposite or the complement. Notice where Randy's colors are it's spaces for the other one. And where what Don's colors are, it's spaces for Randy. So if you want to engage Randy, you see that 9 in Quick Start. Most of you are familiar with Kolbe, but maybe not everyone. Am I right? So I'll just do a very quick overview of this. Kolbe measures 4 action modes: Fact Finder, Follow Through, Quick Start, and Implementer. Fact Finder goes from 1 to 3, just the forest, and very few trees. I'm there too, by the way. And I love being there. 4 to 6, you give and get information, editing it very well. Once you hit a 7 or more, you will gather a great deal of specific, precise, exact information, and very strategic and priority oriented. In follow through, Randy is in the Robin Williams zone. No script needed. So is Joel, by the way. Right, Joel? I think you're 3 there. Okay. So it's no script needed, and it's like, oh, we could do it this way, we could do it that way. We could also do it this way. And the 7, 8, 9, 10s, like Don here, is don't mess with my system. I've got it all figured out, got it all organized. It's very efficient. And then Randy will go, do we need that step over there? Can we take a shortcut over here? You know, this system has gotten so rigid. We got to shake it up. Now, to Don, Randy's rather inefficient because he doesn't repeat ever any process. He'll do it differently each time. So, yeah, it might be inefficient, but Randy will get you to become more agile. And if you get stuck with my way is the way, which is emotional, you won't see that, and you won't have the capacity to take high conflict potential into synergy. It'll go to stress rather than synergy. But you need the people in the 7, 8, 9, 10, our COOs, our logistics people, our architects, our engineers, okay? Design people need that. Now, when you look at Randy's Quick Start, that's the most sort of clear. When Randy makes a decision, as I do, as Joel does, as Harry does, these are people with 7, 8, 9 Quick Start like Harry, they jump into the future, and they're legendary in their ability to come up with what's possible. That's what engages us. Fact Finder, like Don, he's engaged by what's provable. Very different. One goes to the past, one jumps into the future. So if you want Randy's attention, do not give him the preamble and the background and all the details. You hit him right away with, Randy, here's the bottom line that I found out. Okay? What do you want to do? Or here are my 3 top recommendations. Do you need any information? Often he won't. He'll just run with you and start brainstorming some more. So the key to engagement is you need to know where the other person starts. And if they're fact finders, you give them the information, or you tell them, send them an email and say, would you research this in relation to these goals? After you've done your research, come. Don't do drive-bys with a guy like Don, where you just pop into their office and start. They'll be asking 20 questions before they can engage. You might as well let them do the research first, come up with a plan, and then say, here, hit me with your plan and be ready for me to poke holes in it. That's Randy. So, by the way, the last one is implementer, from the word implement or tool. and it goes from very abstract to very concrete. So the 7, 8, 9, 10s are the carpenters and the plumbers and the mechanics and the sculptors. And if you're a construction engineer, you probably have, you'll be an atypical engineer because they'd be generally red, blue. But you can have a red, yellow. That's your typical construction engineer. So that's the hands-on, or a person like Don, very abstract. Doesn't need to be face-to-face, doesn't need to be on site, and they deal with abstract or virtual reality very well. Ratios, numbers, and concepts, okay? So to answer your question, Randy, you don't know the person's holding. You always start with a goal, because the instincts do not get engaged until you say yes. So you start with, is it okay if we talk about this? Would you give me your talent as we talk about this? Great. You engage the will. The will has to be engaged. And then you go, so Jack, what do you need? And then you wait. And if you get a bunch of questions or a moderate amount, you're probably already in the 5, 6, 7 in fact finding. And then you keep on asking questions. So how would you go about doing this? If they're quick starts like Randy, they just go, oh, we can do it this way. How about this? How about that? And they'll jump into the future. Then you know there's quite a bit of quick start there. If they give you a very sequential, like 1, 2, 3, 4, then you have the telltale signs of follow through. And you'll see things like they're telling you a story, or they're telling you an event, and they're going sequence, and then you interrupt them. And you take them out of their game, and they'll answer you, and then they'll go right back to where they were. Well, I was telling you, remember this? Yeah. Okay, then next. Then you've got a really good confirmation of follow through. If they show you stuff, if they take you to the planet and they show you, I remember Frank, do you remember that engineering company of big ticket items about somewhere south? You don't need to mention the name. Oh, Steve was the one that referred us. This guy, somewhere near Paola or somewhere there. And he took us, he was a fact finder implementer. He took us to the plant, and man, did he glow when he was showing us, pointing to this and walking us around. Then you know, demonstrating instinct is the implementer. So you make sure that as you're talking about the goal and what the issues are and what the strategies are to get there, speak their language. And you get great rapport.
Hey, Ramon, this is Harry. Randy and I are co-presenting to Linda Endicott's class in a couple of weeks, and we're both 9 green. So you might want to put a warning out to her or the kids, the students, because this is going to be crazy.
Yeah. Well, Linda, do you remember
knows, Harry? Come on, she already knows.
Linda, do you remember your quick start score?
I just posted it. I was an 8453.
Okay, 8453. So Linda will need an agenda, okay, to make her comfortable. And that's going to be a struggle for Randy and Harry, although Harry is in the mid-range in fact finder. So Harry, you may, and because you're also a 6 in follow through, Harry, you create the outline. You find out the 3 priorities that Linda has. Fact finders are very priority oriented. So you ask her, what are the 3 top priorities you want us to hit? And then, Harry, you take that and come up with a general outline, not too specific. And then you and Randy need probably just 5 minutes to say, what are we going to hit? What's urgent here? And in your quick start, you're so good at highlighting. That's what you really are, because it's urgency driven. But Linda, don't sort of expect that they'll follow the outline. Okay.
Oh no, I've already prepped the class. They already know this. These are the average age of my student in here is 42. So these people and their reputations kind of come before them as well. So I think we're ready.
And tell them to interrupt these 2 people. They do better with interruptions.
Oh, true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Interact with them. Don't let them finish the whole thing. When they're about ready to finish a point, hit them with, well, what about this? And their energy will be renewed.
I like the fact that I have the best profile. I think you told me a long time ago, Ramon, that my profile was awesome and it was the best one you could possibly get. So that's very
absolutely.
Cool. I've retained that.
Come on, he told that to everybody. Hey, Ramon, I have a question. It's along the same lines because I could certainly relate to Harry and to Randy, and I think this is interesting too. And Linda, I'll make a confession right now, but Linda definitely is a planner, and I did an event with 4 other people a couple of weeks ago, and the amount of details that went into planning this thing, it was like every day. And if I'm going to make a confession right now, I don't know that I really looked at any of it, but the result, I looked at what I needed to look at when I was ready to go. And I looked and responded to what I needed to respond to when it was needed. But to get too deep into those weeds just makes me nervous and uncomfortable. But at the same time, I understand that for Linda not to get that response. So in my case, I was lucky because some of the other participants kind of thought the way she did and they could handle that part. But how do you kind of meet somebody in the middle for that? Because and you've told me, Ramon taught me that I haven't been procrastinating my whole life, which I thought was really bad. I do my best with my back against the wall. Linda, on the other hand, is an amazing planner.
So Joel, I believe you're a 6'3", 8'4".
Sounds right. I don't know if the H right. Yeah, no, I think
in other words, quick start, fact finding. But look at this. If you were taught, as 99% of us were taught by our teachers, they always told you, get your 3x5 cards, get all the facts, then do an outline, and then write. Well, that's not the way Harry, Joel, or Randy, or I do things. Joel must jump before asking questions. You were taught to ask questions and then jump. That's where learning can get in the way of your instinct because you were trained and taught. And if you buy it, you'll feel guilty doing things at the last minute, which is the best that Joel does. But after, Joel, if you recall, after you jump and you've scoured the possibilities, then you go to fact finding. So to deal with somebody like Linda, use her fact finder first and say, Linda, give me the main facts and your main priorities, and I'll take it from here. And then you jump into the future and just sort of brainstorm and near deadline, bottom line, near deadline, maybe even on the way to this, to class or to the
Ramon.
event.
Ramon, this is Drew. I mean, you're the true art to what you do with Colby, whether it's Colby, whether it's DISC, the true art comes not about understanding yourself. It's also understanding the people around you. And I'm going to ask the question, which is blind spots, because clearly people like Linda and myself, I'm a 9421. I'm the 9542. We understand our strengths, but we also understand our weaknesses. And I would argue, and this goes back to Sun Tzu, knowing your enemy is great, but if you know yourself, you'll never lose 1,000 battles. How do you use the Colby to cover blind spots? Whereas my profile is very heavy weighted one way, and Randy's is heavy weighted another way, and both of us understanding each other is really the true art to making great organizations. How do you manage to do that with the team other than to go through the entire lesson of the Colby?
Very wonderful question, Drew. The first thing is to remember that the only thing you need to agree on is a goal, the outcome. But start there. Do we have a common vision? If you don't, exit the conversation. You're talking to somebody politically and you get into a polarized view, just ask, what is it you want out of the immigration thing? Is this what you want? If you have totally uncommon goals, politely exit, because you'll just add to the polarization. You don't need common ground. This is a big myth. Okay, you need common vision. Common ground sometimes gives us the idea we have to think in the same way, have feelings, same strategies or methodologies. No, it's just the outcome. So that's one. The other thing is, let me share this again. Now look at Randy. Let me describe Randy, and I'm still going to get back to your question, Drew. I'll tell you what Randy would look like at the immature emotional level. Okay, if he's a leader at the immature level, he'll be shifting goals every week. He goes to a seminar, gets excited over there, comes back, and he'll change everything. And he'll be impulsive, because being impulsive is at the non-rational level. But the problem is not quick start. The problem is ego-centered. He won't ask people questions. What do they want? How might they get it? Now, when you achieve the rational level, Randy, you were still quick start. You were still jumping into the future and doing things at the last minute, or while you're doing it, your best work came out, even on your toes, but you're aware of other people, of other views. At the wisdom level, he's guided by purpose. My purpose, your purpose, our purpose. Now, if you keep that in mind, that maturity or stage is different from style. Style is constant. You can be a 9 in fact finder like Drew, and be picky, obsessive, authoritarian in a very specific way, or rational, able to get information and allow other people to give their information, or really wise and governed by purpose. So, in answer to your question, Drew, you are absolutely right. Whatever instrument you use, Colby or Myers-Briggs, the key is maturity. How to understand others, how to connect with them. And once you have rapport, then you can let them sweat, but not till you have rapport. So rapport and initiative are two concepts. Rapport is, Do we have mutual understanding and caring? It's like the anesthesia to before surgery. You have that. But then when you get to initiative, don't sweat the job more than the job holder. So you set those structures that way, and then you manage according to their instincts. It's very powerful because it comes from within them. And the control metaphor just simply doesn't work because it isn't true. There is no such thing as control in our universe. Every person responds according to their nature, the way they think, what their beliefs are, their values, the way they feel, and the way they act, which is instincts. Then you bring the best out of them, and the only influence you have is, do you have a common goal? Because if they don't make that commitment to a common goal, you will not see these instincts. Drew, is that helpful, or did you want more?
You know, something interesting about this, Ramon, and
that, Ramon.
something interesting, and I think it probably aligns with something I know Harry and I are pretty aligned about. Nothing you've talked about here has to do with pedigree, what college you went to, what companies on your resume. So the hiring process that's so oriented towards check the box pedigree stuff really doesn't capture what you've captured here.
Very well. And you know, your story, Randy and Harry, if you listen to Harry, you don't even get a sense of the fact that, unless you're talking about the Hoosiers, okay, then you're in trouble. But you do not get a sense from Harry of being academic at all. And that's his gift. And so are yours too, Randy. It's very, Harry is very innovative, but he's also sequential. He's a theorist, a combination of quick start and follow through. He'll jump and then he'll do backward planning so easily, so flawlessly. I don't know if you've seen that. But to your point, Randy, I love that. It doesn't matter whether you have a PhD, whether you're 80 or 20, male, female, the instincts, in my view, are the true measure of respect, freedom. The freedom to be who you are is the gateway to success. Not your pedigrees or degrees or skin color, gender, none of that. It's who are you?
Ramon, forgive me, I was multitasking earlier, so I might have missed it. But as a follow-up to Randy's question or comment, you're the CEO and you're interviewing people for a specific leadership role. So you know the requirements of that position and maybe have an idea of what the Colby scores ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
Without taking the Colby in an interview or prior to the interview, how do you assess an individual's Colby factors through a series of questions that relate to the position they're interviewing for?
Mm-hmm. So a few key questions, and to make the answer more rounded, some of you may know that there's a Colby C index. The personal index is Colby A. And the C index is taken by the manager or people who know quite a bit about that position, and it will give us scores. And then out of that, I create a high performer profile. That here's what we need in Fact Finder. Here's a range we need in follow through. Here's a range we want in Quick Start and Implement. So I have some sense of what the job requires. That's if I have that in the background, it's really helpful. But I would ask questions like, Jack, tell me about a project that you've done sometime in the past that really went very well. Could you tell me what happened and how you did that? It will begin to give you where they start. Are they very strategic? That would be fact-finding. Are they very sequential, planning, and they get excited about, boy, we got this thing? Or do they start with, man, right from the start, we jumped on it and learned as we went along? Learning through trial and error is the quick start way. It's a trial and error way. And therefore, by the way, it's very unconventional. In big business, they know these are the rainmakers, but they don't like them. Right, Harry? Randy? So ask them how they did, and if they tell you a lot about really going into demonstrating and building the physical components and the spatial components of a project, those are the things you look for. But also ask, tell me about a project you got into that just raised your stress levels like crazy, because they will begin to describe the things that they don't do, but were expected to do or were forced to do. So in Quick Start, if you want to know, for instance, a stabilizer, like my wife is a 2 in Quick Start, I'm an 8. A stabilizer, if they're telling you about a high stress situation, there's so many moving parts at the last minute, I did not have a plan and I had to wing it. Randy and Harry would go, yes. Bring it on, baby. Okay.
So Ramon, why was Harry Campbell a good fit at DuraVision?
Primarily because at that point they needed somebody who would expand sales, expand markets, but also have the capacity to bring that team together. Quick start, follow through. And Frank, are you still with us? Maybe he's gone.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Remember how we were secretly saying, I hope they choose Harry?
Oh, yeah. And we looked at many folks, right? I think like 52. We interviewed 52 people. Yeah.
But then they were down to the last 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had to be unbiased. We had to tell them, here are the factors. And they decided, Dan and Ann Gurry. And it took a while. And then when they settled on Harry, I think it was hard for me to wait before I could tell you, right, Harry?
But I think what's awesome about that is if you looked at his resume, he had very little eye care experience, at that point.
Yeah. This is not subject matter expertise.
He knew he needed work on his eyes, but he didn't have any experience in that particular sector.
Hey, I was an East Asian history major in college, so I was ready for that job.
But that's a good comment, Randy, is subject matter expertise is good to have, if you've got the knowledge. But if you don't have the instincts, training goes very slow. The return on effort, like training, is slow. If you have the right instincts, the return on effort is very high.
Yeah, and Harry's a great example of that with DuraVision. And in the business I'm in, I have dozens and dozens more. So a great example of where industry or segment experience just really didn't play a role at all. And we actually interviewed a handful of people that were in that business, right, Ramon? Remember?
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they just weren't as sharp as Harry. That's the bottom line. Just not.
One of them, his whole career was in eye care.
Yeah.
Dave.
Yeah, West Point grad, all of that. So, Randy, I have a question for Ramon. May I ask it?
Sure.
So, Ramon, you've been a great mentor for me and my daughters, and this presentation is very timely. A couple of weeks ago, I was at my daughter's house, and my grandchildren were there. And I was actually thinking about you and the Colby and my grandkids. And I know that Kathy Colby actually works with small children and so on. But the question I have for you is, at what stage in life or age, I guess maturity, kids mature at different pace, at different rates and so on. But some thoughts on our children, our grandchildren, passing these ideals on to them. What's a good time for that, and thoughts on how to make that happen?
If you've got a kid that has 5th grade reading level, they can take what's now called the student aptitude quiz. So for under 17, but has 5th grade reading level, once they're 17 and have had a little work experience, we go with the Colby A, the adult version. So there's the youth version. Our granddaughter was about 6 when I did the thing that we use for young kids from 2 to 3 until they get to 5th grade reading level. We called it the Brainy Act. And a kid is given a bunch of stuff, and we video the child with one question. Could you create a work of art? And we video that until the child is done. It could be 3 minutes, it could be 10 minutes. Now for that, it's a little intensive because then the family sends the video clip to Colby, and her group of evaluators there will come up with the best guess, even as a child. And even if you know 1 or 2 of these 4, you know, when you have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, it's fantastic. And so to give you the end of this story, last year when our granddaughter went into 4th grade, her scores, by the way, would be something like 4, 2, 6, 8, meaning an implementer, hands-on girl with a lot of quick start. And I did the teachers, Colby, and they were opposite. It was 7, 8, 2, 3. Okay, it was like Randy and that guy Don. So I interpreted the teacher's Colby, and I said to her, forgetting her name now, Mrs. Hurley. Mrs. Hurley, every 50-minute period you have, would you please, in addition to giving facts and running them through methods, move them. Moving is very important for implementing. They need to move. If they're there seated for 50 minutes without motion, they will lose focus. And I'm not talking ADD, I'm talking talent. And then secondly, because of the 6 and quick start, have them do a brainstorming thing. Like, hey kids, how many different ways could we, use a metaphor, skin this cat? Or how many different ways can we go about getting here? That involves the quick start, brainstorming. Even just a few pieces like that because 80% of teachers are fact finder or follow through or a combination, 80%. So who are the students that do well? Fact finder, follow through. Do your 3x5 cards, do your outline, and then follow that darn outline, which Randy will not do it that way. So as a young student, Randy wrote the paper or did the project without getting too much information or having a plan. But if the teacher demanded an outline, he would do an outline after he wrote it. Is that right, Randy?
You were in my class?
Yeah,
I
I observed you as a disembodied angel watching.
Thank you, Ramon.
I think our time is up. I know I still have time, but I don't want to assume
I got
you will stay.
A question here from someone. One, to make sure we mention your books and where they can find your books. And then also for folks who want to learn more about the Kolbe or how to have you help administer that in the organization, how can they reach you?
Sure. The latest book that's published is still called it's Of Pebbles and Grenades, subtitled 3 Keys to Self-Mastery. So that will contain a lot of the wisdom ideas going from emotional, rational, and wisdom. One of the things I would like to do is I'm doing a 2.5 leadership training in mid-April, 2.5 days, where I'm attempting to pass on the bulk of what I've learned as a coach, as a leader. It's called Wisdom, Leadership, and Coaching, April 13 to 15. Randy, what I can do, if it's okay with you, is send you an e-brochure for that and share it with your members if they're interested.
Yes, that'd be great.
And then with that training will come my next book, which is simply called Wisdom, Leadership. It's in press. It's not published yet. But everyone in the seminar will get a download of that. If you don't go to the seminar, if you know some people, there will be only 20 people for that 3-day event. I would appreciate it if you would share that e-brochure. It would be very helpful to me. And if you have my email, so feel free to contact me for anything. I'd be more than glad to respond.
Well, great. Well, this has been awesome, Ramon.
Thank you. And let me end, if I could, Randy, with if there's any single piece that I would encourage you to be really great students of, it's how to live and lead at the wisdom level. There's a huge difference between the rational and the wisdom level. The rational is overrated. It's necessary, but oh so insufficient. And if you want to prove me right, if you're having a difficult conflict with your spouse, friend, parent, child, associate, just try reason.
So Ramon, do you have some book recommendations on the rational or the wisdom level that you could pass on as well?
I do, but it's a little theoretical. It's a book by Ken, K-E-N, Wilber, W-I-L-B-E-R.
Send that to Randy and he can pass it.
I will. Integral Psychology. And there Ken takes about 100 of the stages of development. And I've used some of that then to simplify it, but it's a very good way. What we really need is examples. because that's a very academic approach, philosophical. This guy's probably the brightest man alive. He knows everything, really does. And I translated it, and I'm hoping that in my next book, I can do more of that.
And Ramon, also too, I wanted to thank you for talking to my wife, Danita, and helping her understand how my opinion is typically more valuable than hers, and I'm usually right. You've helped me. No, really, it's been helpful. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And it was my pleasure to get to know your daughter too.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thanks, Ramon.
You're welcome. My pleasure being with you all.
It was great to spend time with you. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Peace.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.